Texas Hill Country, April 1872. The first shot missed her by inches. Zadie Keller did not scream. She shoved her blood-soaked skirts higher and ran, heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The second shot cracked through the air behind her, closer this time. She did not look back. The cedar trees tore at her arms as she pushed through a narrow break in the brush, thorns biting into her skin. Her shoes were long gone, lost somewhere back near the creek where the settlers had caught up to her wagon. Where her father had been shot. Where her mother's screams had been silenced too fast. She had not stopped running since. Zadie stumbled down a slope and crashed hard into the dry earth, her shoulder slamming into a rock. She rolled, gasping, then crawled to her feet again. Her side burned, but the pain was distant. The only thing that mattered now was staying ahead of the horses she could hear crashing through the trees behind her. They went this way. She ain't far. Voices. Close. She darted into a thicket of juniper and dropped to her belly, face pressed into the dirt. Her fingers dug into the dry ground as footsteps approached. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She felt the ground tremble as hooves passed within yards of her. Then silence. Minutes or hours passed, she could not tell. Her body shook. Her lips were cracked from thirst. The sun was dropping low, throwing long shadows across the hills. She waited until the only sound she could hear was the wind in the trees. Then she moved. Zadie pushed herself up and started walking. She had no direction, no plan, only a way. She was alone. Her family was gone. Her skin was raw from sun and brush, her dress torn. But she kept walking. She did not know when she collapsed. Her legs simply stopped working, and she fell to her knees in a clearing. Her vision swam. She dropped her head forward, forehead hitting the dirt, and whispered, "Please." Then everything went black. When she woke, the world smelled like smoke and cedar. Zadie blinked slowly. A fire crackled nearby. She was lying on a bed of furs and blankets. Her wounds had been cleaned. Her wrists were wrapped. She tried to sit up, but a hand pressed gently to her shoulder. "You are safe." The voice was deep, low. She turned her head sharply and saw him. He sat beside the fire, sharpening a long knife with smooth, practiced strokes. His face was calm, but his eyes watched her, dark, steady, unreadable. He wore no shirt, only deerskin breeches. His chest bore old scars. His black hair was braided back, one feather tied behind his ear. "Who are you?" Her throat was dry. The words rasped out. "My name is Nashoba Redbow. Comanche." Zadie's breath caught. She had grown up hearing stories from settlers about Comanche raids. But this man had not killed her. He had saved her. She looked down at her hands. Her skin was clean. Her wounds were wrapped with care. He had saved her. "You found me. You collapsed near my camp. I saw the blood. I followed the trail back. The men who attacked you settlers." Zadie nodded slowly. Her voice cracked again. "They killed my parents. Burned our wagon. They said we were on their land." Nashoba's jaw tightened. He looked away for a moment, then stood. "You need water." He walked to a pack near the fire, poured fresh water from a gourd into a wooden cup, and brought it to her. She took it with trembling hands and drank. The water tasted clean and cold, and it made her eyes sting. "Thank you," she whispered. He sat again, not too close, but not far, watching her. After a while, he said, "They will be back, looking for you. I know. I will not let them find you." Zadie looked at him. Really looked. He was younger than she had first thought. Maybe not older than 30. His features were strong, but there was something quiet about him. Something steady. "Why?" she asked. He did not answer right away. He tossed another log onto the fire and stared into the flames. "My sister was killed by settlers. I could not stop it." She watched him in silence. He said nothing more, but his words hung between them. "I am sorry." He nodded once, but his eyes stayed on the fire. The next day, Nashoba led her deeper into the hills. He knew the land like breath. He moved without sound, always alert. He taught her how to stay low, how to cover her tracks. They traveled only at night, resting in small hollows during the day. He gave her jerky and dried berries. She never asked where he got them. They barely spoke. But sometimes, in the quiet, he would glance at her. And sometimes she would catch herself looking back. One night, as they sat by a small fire hidden behind a rock outcrop, Zadie asked, "Do you live alone?" "My people are farther north. I watch this land. It was once ours." Zadie looked into the fire. "I never wanted to take anything from anyone. My father just wanted land to farm." He nodded slowly. "Some settlers come with peace, but others come with guns." Zadie swallowed. "I did not want any of this." He looked at her. "I know." Their eyes met. Something shifted. On the fourth night, they heard the horses again. Nashoba pulled her behind a boulder and crouched low. She could see the riders, 3 men, rifles slung across their backs, scanning the trees. "They are close," she whispered. "I will lead them away." "No," he looked at her, voice firm. "I will come back for you." Before she could stop him, he disappeared into the trees. Zadie waited, heart in her throat, every sound sharp in the dark. She heard shouting. A gunshot. Then silence. She stayed hidden until dawn. When he finally returned, his shirt was torn, blood on his arm, but he was alive. She rushed to him. "You are hurt, it is nothing. You could have died." He looked at her, chest rising with each breath. "I told you I would come back." Zadie stepped closer. "You should not have done that." "I had to." "Why?" He looked into her eyes. "Because you matter." She reached up, touched his face. His hand came to her waist, slow and careful. Their kiss was quiet, but full of everything they had not said. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in the hush of dawn. The danger was not gone. But in that moment, they were safe. And they were not alone anymore. The rains came 2 days later, soft at first, brushing the leaves like breath, then heavier, streaking down the limestone in cold threads. Zadie stood beneath the overhang Nashoba had led her to before the first drop fell, her back pressed to the stone, arms wrapped across her chest. The air smelled of wet earth and crushed sage. Nashoba crouched nearby, his hands methodically stripping bark from a branch. His movements were practiced, quiet. The small fire between them hissed each time the rain reached it. "You always know what's coming," she said, watching the storm slip through the trees. He didn't look up. "You learned to read the signs." She shifted, pulling the blanket tighter. "Did someone teach you?" "My uncle. After my father was taken. He raised me." She hesitated. "Taken." "Killed," he said, voice even. "By soldiers near the Brazos. They mistook him for a scout." The fire popped sharply. Zadie looked at him, the way his jaw set with restraint, not rage. She stepped closer to the heat. "I used to think soldiers were meant to protect us," she said, her voice low. "But now I don't know who's us and who's them. You saw what they are. I saw what men do when they think no one will hold them to account." He finally looked up then, the stripped branch in his hand forgotten. "And yet you still came west." "My father wanted to grow pecans. Said the soil here was kind. Said if we planted deep enough, we get shade and sweetness both." Nashoba nodded once. "The pecan's strong. Even in a dry year, it keeps bearing." She let out a breath. "He'd have liked you." He went back to his work, but his eyes lingered on her a moment longer this time. When the rain eased, they moved again north by his judgment, though she had no way to mark direction. The land changed as they climbed, thinner trees, more rock, fewer signs of settler presence. He taught her how to listen for animals before they saw her, how to move without crushing twigs, how to find water when the creeks were dry. One night, as they camped near a shallow arroyo, she watched him skin a rabbit. His hands moved with care, as if the animal still deserved honor. She waited until he finished before she spoke. "What happens when we reach your people?" He glanced up. "You'll be safe there." She shook her head. "That's not what I meant." He folded the pelt, set it aside. "You don't belong among them. You'd be watched. Judged. I've already lived through worse than judgment." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached for a coal from the fire and used it to blacken the meat, slow and steady. "You think they'll turn me away?" she asked. "No. They'll watch me. Wonder why I brought you." "And why did you?" He didn't answer until the meat was done. "You were alone," he said, handing her a piece. "And I couldn't leave you to die." She took it, fingers brushing his. That's not the same as wanting someone to live. He looked at her then, long and direct. No, it's not. She said nothing else after that. Neither did he. But their silence was no longer empty. Later, when the stars came out and the fire burned low, she woke to find him kneeling by the edge of the camp, his back to her, watching the trees. She rose and stepped quietly to his side. Did you hear something? No. Just a feeling. She stood beside him, arms folded, the hem of her dress damp with dew. You always watch, she said. I've seen what happens when no one does. She reached for his hand, slowly. When he didn't pull away, she laced her fingers with his. I see you, she said. He turned then, his eyes dark in the moonlight, not guarded the way they once had been. She didn't smile. Neither did he. But something passed between them, solid as the ground beneath their feet. They stayed that way until the coyotes called, distant and low, and the world fell quiet once more. The air grew thinner as they climbed into the high country. Spring hadn't touched these hills yet, only bare cottonwoods and wind-worn rock, the land stripped clean by winter's long hand. Zadie's legs ached by midday, but she didn't complain. Nashoba moved with deliberate pace now, not fast, but steady, always glancing back to check her footing. At a narrow pass where two ridgelines met, he paused. There's a cave ahead. You'll rest there tonight. She nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her skin had darkened under the sun, dust settling into every crease. She no longer looked like the girl who'd climbed from a wagon with a bonnet and a Bible tucked under her arm. That girl had died by the creek. The cave was shallow but dry, with a ceiling low enough that she had to stoop. Nashoba laid his bow and quiver near the entrance and built a small fire from the driest twigs he could find. She sat cross-legged across from him, watching the flames catch. What did you do before this? She asked. His eyes flicked to her, then back to the fire. I scouted. For my people. For traders, sometimes. You worked with traders? Some. Not the kind who steal. There are men who keep their word. She tucked her knees to her chest. My father used to say a man's word was worth more than his land. He was right. She let the silence stretch, the fire making shadows dance across the cave walls. Then she asked, Where's your mother? She died giving birth to my sister. Zadie let her chin rest against her knees. I never had brothers or sisters. That makes you more alone. Not anymore. He looked up at her then, not with surprise, but with something quieter. Acceptance. She held his gaze. Have you ever thought about leaving this land? She asked. For what? For somewhere without blood in the soil. Where no one's trying to take what isn't theirs. Where you could just be. He shook his head once. There's no place like that. Not anymore. Maybe there never was. She watched the firelight shift across his face. If you stayed with your people, what would you do? Teach the boys to track, ride, hunt? There's fewer who remember how. You want children? He glanced at her, then reached for a piece of dried venison. If I had a son, I'd name him after my uncle. What about a daughter? I'd ask her mother to choose. She looked at her hands. I've never thought of myself as someone's mother. You would be kind. She let that sit for a moment, feeling something unfamiliar and soft move through her ribcage. I don't know what I would be now, she said finally. I don't have anything to go back to. You're not going back. No, he broke the venison in half and handed a piece to her. Then you must decide what to become. She took it carefully, fingers brushing his again. Do you already know what I am? I know what you're not. She chewed slowly. And what's that? Helpless. That night, a cold front swept through the pass, and the fire burned low. Zadie woke to the sound of Nashoba shifting his weight beside the entrance. She pulled the blanket closer and sat up. You haven't slept, she said. There's wind tonight. It carries scent farther. You think they're close? I think they've stopped looking, but I won't stop watching. She crawled over to the entrance and sat beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. The sky above was clear, the stars sharp and bright. You never asked me what my name means, he said. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. It means wolf. She let that settle. You live like one, she said. He turned toward her, voice low. No. I live because I've learned when to fight and when to disappear. She studied his profile in the starlight. Then maybe that's what I'll become. A wolf. No, he turned fully toward her, his voice rougher now. You're something else. She waited, heart steady. You were made to endure. But not alone. She reached for his hand, slid her fingers over the back of it. Then stay. His hand turned beneath hers, fingers curling around hers. I'm not going anywhere, he said. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he let her. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a memory. Inside the cave, they were warm. Together. And for the first time in weeks, sleep came to both of them without fear. By the time they reached the valley floor, the snowmelt had swollen the streams and the ground beneath their feet gave way with every other step. Nashoba guided them through a narrow draw where the trees thickened and the noise of water drowned out all else. Zadie followed close behind, boots caked in red clay, her breath rising in quiet puffs. He stopped near a cluster of cottonwoods, their trunks dark with rain, and tilted his head slightly. Deer passed through here yesterday, he said, gesturing to a broken fern. She crouched beside him, studying the crushed stalk. How can you tell? He ran his hand lightly over the mark, the stems still green where it bent. If it were older, it would have dried. She nodded, watching the way his fingers moved. You always notice what's still living. He looked at her, but said nothing. They made camp near the edge of an abandoned pasture, hemmed in by old fencing posts half sunk in the ground. There was no sign of a homestead, only the bones of what might have been cultivation once. Wild onions grew in tangled patches beneath the grass. Nashoba dug some up and handed them to her without a word. As she peeled them by firelight, she asked, Do you think they ever came back? No, he said. Too many stones in the soil. Whoever tried didn't understand what this land keeps and what it rejects. She set the onions in the pot. I used to think land could be owned. Now I think it just allows us to stay for a while. He stirred the pot with a branch, the scent of broth rising. That's closer to the truth. Later, as they ate, she watched his expression shift as he chewed, focused, not hurried. He always ate as though the food mattered. She set her bowl down. What are you going to do once I'm not in danger anymore? He didn't answer right away. The firelight caught the scar near his collarbone, and he rubbed his thumb against his palm once before replying. I thought I would return north when the grass came back, but I don't feel the pull anymore. Why? He looked at her fully then. Because I've begun to wonder if watching over you wasn't just duty. She held his gaze. I wondered when you'd say it. You already knew? I hoped. He nodded once, like that settled something. You never asked to be protected. I didn't need to. A bird called from the trees then, sharp and low. Nashoba stood, bow in hand before she could rise. But after a moment his shoulders eased. Just a night bird. Zadie stepped up beside him, placing her hand on his arm. You don't have to keep bracing for danger. His voice was quiet. I don't know how not to. She let her hand stay. Then let me remind you you're not alone anymore. That night, they lay beneath the same blanket, neither speaking. Her cheek against his shoulder, his hand resting lightly over hers. No urgency. No fear. Only breath and warmth and the steady sound of one heart sinking with another. In the morning, he woke before her and sat beside the fire, sharpening the arrowheads he'd carved from flint the day before. When she stirred, he glanced over. There's a place just beyond these hills, he said. A ridge where the soil's yellow and soft. It's quiet. We could build something there. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes. Build what? He didn't look away from the arrowhead in his hand. Whatever you want. A place to stay. A place the land might allow. She rose and crossed to where he sat. Her hands settled on his shoulders, firm and sure. Then let's go, she said. Let's find it. He stood, tucked the arrowhead into his pouch, and they began walking, no longer running, no longer chased. They moved side by side now, not just in step, but in rhythm. The path ahead was uncut, but the ground beneath them for the first time felt like it might hold. The ridge turned golden as spring deepened, yellow grasses waving under a pale sky. Nashoba stepped ahead of her, steady in his stride, until they reached a gentle rise where the land opened wide. A hawk circled above. Below, the valley spread out like a quiet promise, flat enough for planting, sheltered by trees, with a creek winding slow along the far edge. Zadie stopped beside him. "This is the place," he said. She didn't answer right away. The silence between them had changed in recent days, no longer heavy with caution but full of knowing. She cast her gaze over the land, eyes narrowing slightly. "There's enough sun here," she said. "If I cleared the patch near the trees, I could grow beans. Maybe squash." He nodded. "And the slope soft enough for a cabin foundation." They stood side by side, letting the wind move through their clothes, the land breathing around them. Then he turned to her, his voice low. "It would be a hard beginning. I've lived through harder," she said. They stayed on the ridge until the sun dipped low, then returned to their camp, which they'd moved to the edge of a small ravine where water pooled after the rains. By the firelight, she stitched a tear in her skirt, and he began shaping cedar branches for the roof frame he'd already drawn into the dirt with a stick the day before. She didn't look up when she spoke. "I'll need to trade for seeds. There's a Mexican family east of here. I traded with them once 2 years back. They keep to themselves, but they're fair. I'll go when the creek drops. And I'll stay and clear the patch." He looked across the fire. "Not alone." She lifted her head. "You think I can't?" "No. I just don't want you to." The thread slipped from her needle. She didn't reach for it right away. "Is that what it is now?" she asked. "Wanting." He set down the frame and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I used to think my life would be made of motion. Riding, watching, returning. But now I want stillness. With you in it." She didn't answer with words. She reached across the fire, took his hand, and held it. The next day they began. Nashoba built the frame with care, not rushing even when the days grew hot. Zadie cleared the patch nearest the treeline, her arms aching each night as she scraped roots from the soil. When they found a rusted iron kettle beneath the ash of an old fire ring, they cleaned it until it shone. By midsummer, the structure stood a single-room cabin with a sloped roof and a door that swung smooth on leather hinges. She painted no words above the threshold, no names. But she hung a string of dried wildflowers along the inside beam, and he carved a small wolf into the doorframe. One morning, as she washed clothes at the stream, she turned to find him kneeling beside her. He held something wrapped in deerskin. "I went east," he said. "Traded with the family. They remembered me." He handed her the bundle. Inside were seeds, beans, corn, a folded scrap of cotton for drying herbs. She looked up at him, eyes wet. "This means we stay." He cupped her face with both hands. "It means we begin." That night, they lay on the cabin's floor, wrapped in a blanket stitched from her mother's old shawl and one of his hides. The wind pressed gently against the walls. She traced the scar on his chest with her fingertips. "What if someone finds this place?" she whispered. "They won't. But if they do?" He kissed her temple. "Then we remind them this land isn't theirs to take. And we don't run." She turned to him, her body warm against his. "I'm not afraid anymore." He looked at her, eyes steady. "You never were." That winter, they kept the fire burning with oak and mesquite. She dried herbs along the rafters, and he tanned hides for trade. In the evenings, she read aloud from the only book that had survived the wagon fire, her voice soft in the quiet. He listened with his head in her lap, one hand curled around her ankle, content. Later, as snow dusted the ridge and the river froze along its edges, she told him she was with child. He didn't speak at first, just gathered her in his arms and held her until the fire dimmed. When he did speak, his voice was quiet. "You were my home." She smiled against his chest. "And you were mine." They named their daughter Luyu, meaning wild dove. She had Zadie's eyes and her father's stillness. In the years that followed, they built a second room, planted more rows, and watched the ridge bloom with each spring. No one ever came to take it from them. And as the seasons passed, the land accepted them not as owners, but as part of it. Forever. Together.